relaxed. We're nearing the end of this Way of the Bow lesson, but I want to leave you with one sort of quick tip to kind of get a little bit of the feel of this action for yourself. And so when we compare the critical moment of the swing, which is Federer in his slotted position with the hinge of the racket, very extreme. You get the maximum amount of tension here that he's going to release. And obviously compare this to the split arms Sharapova linear swing model, and the idea that the player is going to try to want to start to swing this racket all the way back here, and this becomes sort of one unified, slow-moving action through contact without much bend or bow in this, whereas Federer has built all of this up into one gigantic bow structure here at the end that is then going to be released. So to get the feel for this, I just want you to try to copy Federer's form here in this critical moment. So I want you to get down into your legs much more than you normally do, I'm guessing. You know, really bend those knees. Feel a hinge at the hips where you can move forward a little. So we're going to tilt out a little bit more. We'll get into this later in more detail. But I want you to get down into your knees. I want you to bend at the hip joint. And I want you to try to create this form here and feel the stretch of the tension in the forearm, the stretch here. And I'm going to have you do 10 drop hits or against the wall. But I want you to do it in a way that is like drawing the bow of the string. So we already have a buildup of good bow-like tension throughout our bodies here. But in order to get even more, I want you to initiate this swing with a forward movement of your legs and hips into the ball and holding the hitting side back as long as possible. So we're creating even more stretch and elastic energy throughout the body. So you start, as you should in any power stroke, start with the legs and the hips turning and holding this back, holding the hinge back before it's released. And only when you absolutely have to will you release the racket. And you should feel this stretch as you do this in your body, and you should feel extra speed as it's released. This is sometimes called the slingshot effect. So do 10 or 15 of these drop hits, initiating, cropping the form, but initiating the stroke with the lower body and hips first, holding the tension in the racket and the racket tip back as long as possible before we come up and explode and release the whip. I want to conclude this lesson on the Way of the Bow by taking a look at one of the books that inspired me, which was Zen in the Art of Archery by a German professor named Eugene Herrigel. Herrigel went to Japan before World War II. He was a philosophy professor. He was very interested in Zen, and he studied the art of Kudo, which is the Way of the Bow, Japanese art of archery, with Master Kenzo for 5 years in search of what the Zen experience of shooting a bow is like in the Japanese art of archery. Here in this painting you can see the gigantic recurved bow of the Japanese art of Kyudo, and you can also see the bow-like setup of the archer stance, providing stability and strength for the lower body while the archer draws the string. Herrigel studied with Kenzo for 5 years, and after the war Herrigel published Zen in the Art of Archery, a book that has inspired 200 other books with a similar name, and was one of the inspirations for the mission statement of Tennis Reach, which is the art of tennis. The heart of this book is Herrigel's quest to understand the Zen experience of shooting an arrow, or said it another way, shooting an arrow when you're in the zone, not consciously thinking about what you're doing. Master Kenzo described this experience to Herrigel He said, instead of saying or thinking, I shoot the arrow, I meaning the conscious ego mind, allow the arrow to release so that it shoots on its own. In other words, learn when and how to let go. In wrapping up this lesson, The Way of the Bow, the whole idea of being able to let go is not an easy process to accomplish. It takes a long time to perfect the technique that we're trying to let go of conscious control of. To letting things go has to be built up with a long series of precise exercises and deliberate practice, and that's what Tennis Reach is also about. So in wrapping up this lesson, The Way of the Bow, and talking about the experience of Dr. Herrigel and Zen and the Art of Archery, this idea of getting into the zone, letting go of our over trying and our overreaching and our overthinking, so that we can just let our bodies perform at a high level. This is the ideal of sports. This is Zen in the art of tennis, Zen in the art of archery. So we had a quick tip about it today. You can't get there with just a quick tip, obviously. It takes a long time of practice and diligence to first make all of these movements conscious and study them, and then to be able to forget them and become unconscious so that we can let go. But that's a slow and deliberate process called deliberate practice, which is also what Tennis Reach is about. But if you keep at it and you keep watching these videos, you keep understanding these principles at a deeper level, sooner or later you'll start to touch upon this feeling of letting go. And sooner or later, you keep working on this Federer forehand, you're going to have a lot better forehand than you had before. And when your friends comment about your game, they say, where did you get that forehand of yours? You can say, it shoots. And only you, the ghost of Professor Herrigel, and me will understand what that means.